ALC crew, week 15, 2021. Here's what's going on this week. Your feedback entries, Ta-Nehisi Coates' social justice and the American dream revisited, and this week's to-do. First, your feedback entries. Tasia offered the following feedback. Thank you, Miriam, for this insightful book talk. I really liked the quote you picked from the book. It was engaging and made me think about how there are different sides of history, not just the main history we are taught. Racism is something POC like me deal with on a daily basis, so I appreciate your awareness of it. This inspires me to read more books about history. Thank you, Zach, for this detailed book talk. I loved your hook. You really made me want to know more about how people on the South Side live their lives. I personally have never lived there, but a lot of African Americans like me do. So I am glad that you are encouraging yourself and others to read more about the South Side and see how these people are raised differently than we are. Thank you, Ahad, for this dramatic book talk. I loved how you added the mysterious background music to make the listener more engaged. I agree that racial justice is something this country is still trying to figure out and solve, and I'm glad you are bringing the spotlight to this topic. Malik contributed the following. First of all, I want to thank you for making such an intriguing and thoughtful book talk. Throughout your book talk, I appreciated how you kept your voice loud and clear, so I stayed focused during the entire time. Your voice was enthusiastic, which really got me intrigued to keep listening. Your book talk inspired me to read more books that talk about social justice on a personal level. Thank you, Tasia, for taking your time to make a creative book talk. Everything about your book talk was excellently made, but the part that sticks out the most is your detailed description of the book. Every time you talked about the book specifically, it made me want to actually read the book. Your book talk inspired me to make more book talks so people would consider reading more. And Maya offered the following feedback. Thank you, Kylie, for taking the time and putting effort into creating your book talk. In the beginning, I liked how you talked about what the book was about because it helped me understand the book more and the meaning behind it. I also liked how you put your own thoughts into the book talk. You did a good job because you tried to engage the listener and summarized what the book was about. These carefully crafted and thoughtfully given pieces of feedback have been shared with their book talk creators. Thank you again for creating strong connections among one another. This week, we'll take our focus of social justice to the next level by exploring real-world acts of social justice. It can be daunting to contemplate how to even begin working to rebalance an issue of social justice. Where do we start? What would cause meaningful change? What are some examples of social justice in action? Glad you asked. Here are 4 examples. Example 1. NCAA women's basketball players celebrate a new weight room. Recently, according to NBC News, Stanford University sports performance coach Ali Kirshner shared images on Instagram of a small rack of dumbbells in the women's weight room, and then juxtaposed this next to an image of a complete set of benches, racks, and barbell weights in the men's weight room. In his social media post, Kirshner said, "This is the NCAA men's basketball tournament versus women's basketball tournament bubble setup. This needs to be addressed. These women want and deserve to be given the same opportunities. Not only that, 3 weeks in a bubble and no access to dumbbells above 30s until the Sweet 16, in a year defined by a fight for equality, this is a chance to have a conversation and to get better. An act, as Ta-Nehisi Coates would say, of growing into consciousness." Example 2. Michael Jordan and Jordan Brand are inviting community organizations to join the fight to end systemic racism. This is a good one. You might recognize the name Michael Jordan for his legendary contributions to the game of basketball and surrounding culture during the 80s and 90s. Well, now, according to Nike, as part of its 10-year, $100 million commitment to the Black community to fight systemic racism through a focus on social justice, education and awareness, and economic injustice, Michael Jordan and Jordan Brand announced the opening of their first cycle of community grants, providing $1 million to local grassroots organizations that are creating more equitable futures for Black Americans. Growing into consciousness. Example 3. Major League Baseball moves All-Star Game due to restrictive voting laws. Recently, Major League Baseball made a bold move in the direction of equity by refusing to hold its annual All-Star Game in Atlanta, Georgia to protest a piece of unjust policy. According to CNN, the legislation, which was signed last week by Republican Governor Brian Kemp, imposes voter identification requirements for absentee ballots, empowers state officials to take over local election boards, limits the use of ballot drop boxes, and makes it a crime to approach voters to give them food and water as they wait in line. Why does this matter? Because these rules make it more difficult for some people in some communities to cast their vote and have equal representation. Growing into consciousness. Example 4. Evanston approves reparations for Black community. According to NPR, the city of Evanston will make reparations available to eligible Black residents for what it describes as harm caused by discriminatory housing policies and practices and inaction on the city's part. The program is believed to be the first of its kind in the U.S. and is seen by advocates as a potential national model, growing into consciousness. And this will be our focus for this week. Coates made clear in The Case for Reparations, his June 2014 cover story for The Atlantic, that there are structural impediments to Black families building wealth and gaining power that don't exist for white families. In his interview, Coates says, "I have something to say and a way of saying it that can affect things." I believe that similarly, all of you have something to say and a way of saying it that can affect things. For our written response this week, let's focus on this historic milestone of Evanston granting reparations for its Black community. Here are the steps. 1. Watch the 3 videos posted under Confronting an Injustice, Housing Inequity, Wealth Gap, and the Case for Reparations. This will help us understand the broader issue. 2. Listen to Ta-Nehisi Coates revisits the Case for Reparations published by The New Yorker. This will clarify Coates' rationale for reparations. 3. Read the article, "In Likely First, Chicago Suburb of Evanston Approves Reparations for Black Residents." This article will provide the details of this developing story. And 4. Develop an 8 to 10 sentence response that utilizes the X uses Y to show Z formula to establish your position as you respond to the following prompt. How does this news change or reinforce your ideas about the American dream and social justice? What ideas do you have for addressing the issues presented in your book? Some sub-questions to think about as you're developing your response. A. How is Evanston's decision to enact a reparations program an act of social justice? B. Is the notion of the American dream flawed? C. Should we replace the idea of the American dream with a priority of growing into consciousness? D. Can one believe in an American dream and be an agent of social change? And E. How can this be expanded to address other issues of social injustice? Looking for an example claim? Consider this. Coates, X, uses a detailed reparations plan, Y, to begin the process of bringing to justice decades of predatory housing practices that marginalize communities of color, Z. So what do we have to do? 1. Coates, Social Justice, and the American Dream Revisited response. This will be due on Friday, April 16th by 11:59 p.m. That's it for this one, ALC crew. We will see you in virtual class. In the meantime, stay safe, stay focused, and stay connected.